Well, what's happening? Me and Randy are doing something a little different type of hunting today. We are hunting bourbons. We are down in Kentucky. We're going to hit up Buffalo Trace and do the tour there. And then we're going to try to hit up some other distilleries after that.
So today's Trace tour is about basically following the life of the barrel. The barreling, bottling, aging process with some of your favorite Buffalo Trace products. Before we go see some of that stuff, I'm going to spend a few minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about some history and information to make sure everything we see makes some pretty good sense, all right? So our story starts all the way back in the 1700s. We have record of distillation on this property going back to the year 1786. And there's been someone distilling here ever since. That makes us the oldest continuously operating distillery in the United States. So, thanks for coming. Obviously the place looked very different back then. You didn't have the vehicles or electrical wires or any of that. It was the rugged wilderness or the prairie, whatever you want to call it. The only roadways that would have existed for the settlers to follow, people like Daniel Boone, who's actually buried here in Frankfurt, the only roadways for those people to follow would have been trails left behind by huge herds of animals. Specifically here, thousands of buffalo would roam this area, and they would cross the river right on the edge of our property where the river makes a 90-degree sharp turn. Back then the river was not as deep as it is today, and then buffalo would just cross right on over. So the trail they left right here was so massive, like think 4-lane highway type of massive, that on the maps of the 1700s this place was called the Great Buffalo Trace. So it's where we get our name, but we've actually only been Buffalo Trace for 26 years, since 1999. So we got a few gaps to fill in along the way, all right? 1869 is when Colonel Taylor comes along and he purchases the small distillery, immediately gets to work making some improvements and expansions, making sure that basically everybody knew that his bourbon was the best. He was a little bit of a show-off. He knew that copper was really important in the distillation process. It was best metal available at the time, pretty much, and it was going to do some things. It pulls out some sulfurous compounds that you don't want in your whiskey, and it heats up nice and evenly. So copper is still important. He wanted everybody to know that he used a lot of copper, that his bourbon touched nothing but copper from grain all the way to barrel. So he called his distillery OFC, which stood for Old Fired Copper. Eventually, Taylor goes down the road. If you know your other Buffalo Trace labels, George T. Stagg is who takes over after him. Then, in the year 1897, the distillery hires on, by then we were the George T. Stagg distillery. The distillery hires on a scrawny little 16-year-old kid who lived across the road. And he's hired on as a distillery errand boy, basically delivered mail and that sort of thing. Stays on property, and by the time he's 40, he's named president. His name was Albert Blanton. So congratulations to Mr. Albert Blanton for being the 40-year-old president of a major bourbon distillery. Little hiccup in the road though. One great timing. It's 1921 by that point. So that little hiccup that closed up most other distilleries, Prohibition. Blanton is 100% the reason that we're the oldest continuously operating distillery. We did not have to shut our doors during the years of Prohibition. Y'all know what we were making back then? Wasn't actually whiskey.
Medicine.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, it's literally the same stuff. Yeah, still medicine. All you had to do was call it medicine, all of a sudden it's legal. Little loophole in the system. It's set up that way. But we did not have to close our doors because Blanton went out and procured one of just about half a dozen medicinal whiskey licenses so we could keep on producing. Just go to the doctor, tell him you were feeling a little under the weather. He'll write you a prescription for 1 pint of 100 proof medicinal whiskey. Renewable every 10 days. So not a bad deal, not a bad deal. And of course everyone in Kentucky was sick for 13 straight years. By the time 1933, December 5th of 1933 came around, Prohibition was repealed and Blanton was ready to go with his expansion. It was a pretty massive one. For all intents intents and purposes, kind of left the distillery as you see it today. So that's really why I'm telling you these stories. A lot of what you're seeing today is either from Taylor's expansion starting in the 1870s or Blanton's expansion starting in the 1930s. Now, if you've been a fan of us for a little while, you've maybe heard that we've recently wrapped up a third really large expansion on property, because that bourbon boom that hit about 10, 15 years ago, we were not prepared. I don't think anybody was. Nobody saw it coming. So we had to go to our parent company, which is now Sazerac. They're the ones who rebranded us as Buffalo Trace, and say, we got to start making a lot more stuff, y'all. So they helped us out. They gave us a little check for $1.2 billion and said, go do what you got to do. Now, before I tell you what we did with some of that money, just in case someone here is a little bit early in their bourbon drinking journey, here's like the 30-second rundown of how bourbon's made. 30-second Cliff's Notes. So all bourbon starts with grains: corn, rye, wheat, barley. Your mixture, your recipe, you're gonna call your mash bill. Cook those grains until the natural starches and sugars start to emerge, and then put that in a fermentation tank and add yeast. Over a few days' time, that yeast gets busy, it's eating at the sugar, and it creates alcohol instead. So the alcohol's there, but now you gotta kind of pull it out. So you put that mixture into a still. Heat up the still until the alcohol starts to evaporate. Alcohol evaporates at a lower temperature than water, so it comes off first. Catch those vapors at the top, and we're gonna cool it off, put it back into a liquid form that we call White Dog. If you've been to Brown Forman, if you've been to Woodford, they call it New Make, same thing. We just call it White Dog. It's white because it's clear. It looks like water. Dog, stuff's gonna bite you. It's kind of high proof, about 140 proof coming off our still. You put White Dog in a barrel, leave it sit for a while, that's bourbon. That's pretty much it. All right, so you see these 4-story buildings back here that kind of look like office buildings? You have a new one and an old one. Those are our still houses. That older building that was built by Blanton in the 30s, inside of it is the column still that we have been using since the 50s. It's one of the industry's largest, 40 feet tall, 7 feet in diameter, and it can make up to 60,000 gallons of White Dog every single day. If you've bought anything recently, well, actually, if you have anything at home of Buffalo Trace, most likely it came off of that still right there, because the new one right next door is only a few years old at this point. So unless you got some really young bourbon from Buffalo Trace, maybe some benchmark at home, it's possible it came off that still, but for the most part, everything you got came off the old one. The new one is an exact duplicate of the old one. There's not a single difference between them. It's just shinier and prettier. That's all it is. So now we can make up to 120,000 gallons of White Dog every day. Fill in lots of barrels, as you might imagine. But we ran out of place to put them down here. So we had to buy a 220-acre whiskey farm. It's behind the river over on the hill. Up there are 19 completed warehouses. Each one is the size of a football field. Each one has 60,000 barrels, roundabouts. It's a lot of whiskey here, y'all. But $1.2 billion, that'll buy everything you need except for one little thing. I think somebody said it. Time, except that's 2 for 2 on you. I like it. There you go. Time. You can't buy a single second. You need Father Time and Mother Nature. People are trying to cheat those guys out of doing their job. I don't think it's going to work too well. So, y'all ready to go see some stuff? By the way, your all's job is to keep on being patient, keep on drinking, teach the younger generations to, be future bourbon drinkers too. And we'll see some more stuff headed your way soon, okay? Let's head on out this way. All right, y'all, let's talk about the building we just came out of. That was originally a warehouse built by Colonel E.H. Taylor. He built it in 1881, but he didn't really like the taste of the bourbon that came out of it. He didn't feel like it aged bourbon too well. The airflow wasn't quite right for this climate. So it's been repurposed and other things since then, and today makes a pretty good visitor center. So we'll let it do that instead. This building right back here, built in 1885, has done nothing but aged bourbon since Taylor built it. And it's been top bill, what does it say?
OFC.
OFC, that's Taylor's brand. Still saying that. Still aging bourbon since 1885 when it was built. That is the oldest building on our property doing what it was built to do. Any other building of that age has been repurposed into something else by this point. It's beautiful. Those arched windows, that limestone base, it's about 6 stories tall. Picture perfect warehouse right there. You know what all that beauty does for aging bourbon? not a dang thing. Not a dang thing. Bourbon does not care about the beauty of a warehouse, but guess who did? Taylor. C.H. Taylor really cared about that. We'll come on this way a little bit. Underneath these trees. Now we just walked underneath a series of pipes right here, and this thing right here that looks like a monorail, that's just a pipe support system. That's all that is. There's one large pipe that I want to talk about. That is something else that we've been doing since the 1880s with Colonel Taylor, and that one large pipe is going into all of our warehouses. That's how we steam heat the inside of our warehouses. Somebody figured out that if it gets too cold, we now know it's about 45 degrees or less. If it gets too cold, the bourbon stops aging. Those barrels go to sleep. The white dog can't push into the barrel at that temperature. So we don't want that to happen, because as my Harrisburg people can tell you, it stays below 45 degrees here for freaking forever. Forever. So in the wintertime, close to about Halloween, we're going to shut the windows and start pumping in steam heat instead. We don't want it to get too hot. We're going to keep it just the right temperature. You still need heat and cold for aging bourbon well. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But right now, the windows are open. They stay open for about 6 months, middle of May to the end of October. That airflow, also super important for helping to age that bourbon here. Any questions so far?
Yeah, your steam heat is, how is it? I mean, is it a gas-fired boiler? Or
Our boilers run on a natural gas. Yeah, but we use probably more steam than corn here. We use lots of steam to power stuff around here. All right, let's head on down. They're on their way to get used. They're on their way to get filled with 53 gallons of White Dog each. Now the conveyor belt's not moving right now, so either they are finished for the day, which is possible, or they're on break. I'm not sure which one. So this is basically the building where we do receive our brand new barrels from our cooperage down near East Bernstadt, Kentucky. We do not assemble or char our barrels here on property. We leave that to our cooperage. All we do is get them, fill them, and store them. That's what we're doing here. But I want to talk about these barrels because in this room I'm going to talk about basically what makes bourbon bourbon and kind of the difference between bourbon and whiskey. At some point, most of you have had the question, at some point, what is the difference between bourbon and whiskey? I still get asked that about once a week around here. Basically, bourbon is whiskey. It's just a really specific, special type. And boy, are we really picky about our bourbon rules. So let's talk about it. By law, bourbon has to be aged in a brand new charred oak barrel. So we got several back there. We got quite a few back there. Here's what happens. In the heat, that White Dog expands into the barrel. When it contracts in the cold, it's going to bring a lot of that barrel back in with it. And that's basically the aging cycle. So these are some used barrel staves. You see the char on the inside. That was one of the rules for the barrel. You have to char the inside of your barrel for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to kind of open up the wood flavors so the White Dog can pick up a lot of that natural oak and sugar substance in the wood. But it's also going to act as like a charcoal filter. Does anybody have a charcoal filter at home that they're using, like a Brita charcoal filter? It's the exact same thing. It's going to filter out some unwanted substances, some unwanted flavors in there as well. So it's adding some things and it's taking away some things as well. But do y'all see, I don't know if that's a good example, or yeah, there's a good one. Can y'all see that red line running right down the center of that stave? That's how far the bourbon soaked into this barrel over its time, like halfway. So when it goes in, remember it looks clear, like water. When it comes out, it does not look very clear anymore. 100% of the color of your bourbon is coming from that barrel. If you want to add a little bit of coloring, that's fine, but guess what? That's whiskey. You can't call it bourbon anymore. Up to 75% of the flavor of your bourbon is coming from the barrel itself. Because again, you want to add a little flavoring, maybe a little bit of heat, peach, a couple of drops. That's peach whiskey. Can't call it bourbon anymore. The only thing you're allowed to add to White Dog is one thing. And don't overthink it. It's really simple. Water. There you go. Yeah, just add a little bit of water. One of the rules, there are some number rules. There are some proof rules for bourbon. You can't distill it over 160. If you do that, you're in danger of basically getting rid of too much grain flavor. You're in danger of stripping away too much of the grains. It can't go into the barrel at any higher than 125. All you gotta do, add a little bit of water. It's still White Dog. Put it in the barrel. And it cannot be in the bottle any lower than 80. Not that you would want that anyway, but it can't go in the bottle any lower than 80 and still call it bourbon. Those are the bourbon numbers right there. So that red line right there, that's why you can only use a barrel one single time for making bourbon. All these guys back here, once. We'll use them once and then we can't use them anymore. We'll send them somewhere else though, because again, if you try to get that same color and flavor from that same barrel and still call it bourbon, you'd never make it. It would come out looking kind of brown and kind of bourbon tasting. It would be like trying to use a tea bag more than once and get the same result. It'll never happen. But there's no such one-time rule in places like Scotland. Our barrels can go to Scotland and they'll use it to age their Scotch whiskey. Our barrels can go to maybe California. They'll put some wine in there. Maybe tequila, rum, hot sauce, coffee. Y'all been to the grocery store. Y'all seen all the bourbon aged products that you can get. And the list keeps on growing. Beer. I mean, all sorts of things. Rum, tequila. I think I already said tequila. I like tequila, so that's fine. So any questions about those bourbon rules? I'm going to add one more in here. And then there's like the most basic bourbon rule that I haven't talked about yet, because we're going to talk about that next when we talk about our mash bills. But the only other bourbon rule in here is that whiskey can be made anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world you can call it whiskey. For bourbon, it has to come from one place in particular. I wish I could tell you it came from Kentucky. I wish I could say that. If you say Kentucky, I like you, but you're wrong. Sorry. It just has to come from one of the 50 states. Anywhere in America, you can call that stuff bourbon, but Kentucky makes 95% of it. 95% of the entire world supply of bourbon is coming from Kentucky. Partly because of our seasons, really hot summers, really cold winters. Also, that limestone water that we have is just a little bit different here. Limestone naturally filters out things like iron that you do not want in your bourbon. And it also adds some things like magnesium and calcium that happens to mix really, really well with the yeast during fermentation. So it's just a nice little hotbed of resources here in Kentucky for making really good bourbon. Plus, you can throw corn behind you on a hill and it's going to grow. Corn grows like crazy here, so that's also why. All right, that was a lot of talking at you. What questions you got now?
At one point, was it a requirement to be limestone water? It seemed like I heard years ago that was one of the requirements.
It's not actually one of the requirements for bourbon. It just helps a lot. It helps a whole lot. You can use other water. It just might not have the same effect. Let's talk about that part. It does not have to be American white oak. It just has to be something oak. Most of your bourbon distilleries will, though, use American white oak.
Thousand and 87 barrels today.
We can make all our barrels.
All right, everybody. Smells like White Dog in here. You smell that sweetness? Smells almost like corn. That's what you can smell coming from this room. So you have a barrel track right behind me. It shoots straight on back. That's where they're each getting filled with White Dog. Somebody's basically going to pull a lever. They fill about 8 at a time. And then it starts rolling this direction. These tools and stuff here sometimes you don't know if the barrel's going to hold its liquor until you fill it up with something. So if it starts leaking, they're going to try and fix it right here. If they can't fix it, they'll siphon it out, put it in another barrel, and then send the leaky one back to the cooperage to fix. Now these barrels lined up right here on this track, they're brand new. They have been rolled down that way, and this line, this tells me they're not quite done for the day. This line goes all the way to the other end of that warehouse. They go pretty far. These tracks are pitched exactly right, just like the one we just walked past. They're pitched exactly right to get them where those barrels need to go. One little shove and gravity does the rest. So those, what color ink do you see down there? I almost can't see. Is it green? Yeah, that green ink, that tells me that that is our weeded mash bill. So let's talk about our mash bills for a second. Basic Bourbon 101. First thing you learn is that it has to start out with at least 51%
Corn.
Corn, right. So mash bill number 1 for us is going to be corn, rye, barley. I can't tell you exact percentages on that. Sorry, I don't know. I don't know what it is. We don't disclose our mash bills here. We keep it, it's like Colonel Sanders' recipe right there. So corn, rye, barley, but that one recipe is going to grow up inside the warehouse to be things like Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, Stag, Taylor, Benchmark, and Old Charter. All of those from one recipe. All of those, when they leave this room, are exactly the same. No difference between them. Mash 2 is going to be corn, rye, and barley, but this time a little bit more rye. And that's going to grow up to be a lot of the single barrel stuff. That's your Blantons, your Elmer T. Lee, your Rock Hill Farms. It's also Ancient Age. Does anybody remember Ancient Age? There you go. Yeah, so when I was a kid, that's what this place was called, was Ancient Age. Now, y'all are in luck. Behind you are some old barrels that have just been emptied. So now you got new barrels lined up right here and old barrels coming out this way. That is good, because the next stop is going into that building where we can see what's happening in there. But last thing, real quick. That weeded recipe is going to be corn, wheat, and barley, not a single bit of rye in it. And that is all the Weller and Van Winkle products right there. So all those barrels that you're looking at, those will eventually be a Weller or Van Winkle. So right now, they're exactly the same. Exactly the same. Put in at exactly 114 proof. As an entry proof for a weeded mash bill. That's it though. Three recipes. That's it. One type of wood, one level of char, a number 4 char, one strain of yeast, and only 3 bourbon recipes. We keep things in a really small, tight circle here at Buffalo Trace, and then let everything change. We let the warehouses do the heavy lifting for us. All right, so before that gets done, let's go ahead and head around this way so I can show you what's going on in there. In here, which does not happen all the time. But these are already empty. They already emptied of their bourbon. So all of these, this is where all of our batch bourbon starts its journey. All of these barrels have been mingled together. The bourbon comes flowing out and it all gets mingled together to go into one product. That's what batch bourbon is. I like to think about it as if you're making your own homemade spaghetti sauce. Can you all hear me okay over there? Okay. If you're making your spaghetti sauce, you know what it should taste like. You know what spices and ingredients to go use when you mix it all together. It tastes the same every single time. And that's what batch bourbon is all about. These are the spices and ingredients from within the warehouse. Now, all I can do is a little bit of tour guide math. I can look at the mash bill. I see mash bill number 1. It was filled in 2018. So it says. Okay, so that figures out right to probably be a Buffalo Trace. They have probably emptied all of these barrels, and it's most likely going to be going into Buffalo Trace bottles. So all the bourbon gets mixed together. It's going to go into that blue hose, goes to the bottom of the trough, gets sucked up by the blue hose, and then it's going to go to the far corner of the room where it goes through a really large percolation, fine filtering out the little bitty pieces of char of wood that naturally came out along with the bourbon when these barrels emptied out. The big pieces of char, the first round of filtration is happening right on top of this trough where it's catching at a mesh metal grate, catching those bigger pieces, and then they'll go around and they'll actually gather it up. So I'm going to bring this around, let you smell it. It smells fantastic. It's got some fresh char right here. Yeah, we sell everything here. You can buy bags of this in the gift shop. Just good to smell. So we have seen where the barrels start their journey. This is where they end their journey with us. Now it's time to go check out the space in between inside the warehouse. And we'll talk about how everything blossoms and grows into all those different brands and profiles and flavors. Any questions? All right. Oh, by the way, when we head out this way, if you know about the massive flood that we had back in April, when we take a look at this warehouse to give you a little indication of how high the water was in this part of the property. So when we're going to go inside, we're going to go on the bottom floor, but yeah, you can kind of see right here. Now that is how high they did have to pressure wash the outside of the building, so the river wasn't quite at that line, but it's pretty close. It was pretty close. Everything else is black around here, including the trees. That is a distiller's fungus or a whiskey fungus that grows on everything outdoors, anywhere alcohol is being produced. The ethanol in the air just kind of mixes and creates this fungus on everything. It's just coexisting. It's not hurting anything. The trees are still alive. The trees still bloom with flowers in the spring, but they are all black.
Yeah, look at the black trunks.
Looks like everything caught on fire at one point.
Regular buffalo trees. You got to sit on.
All that fungus on there.
White oak tree. Where'd y'all go? All right, everybody. Everybody in? Here, but we are not air conditioning down here. This is basically acting as like the basement or a cellar of your house. If you look over your head, see the space between the slats? That's the way it looks, all the way up to the 9th floor. Warehouse size 9 stories tall. I don't think you're even allowed to build warehouses this tall anymore. I think they cap it at 7 floors, but this one is older than all those rules. So all the heat is going straight up to the top because science is a thing. You want to talk about hot? Go upstairs. You won't last very long. Neither do the barrels. So for us, this is how we go to all of our different flavors and profiles and labels because we don't rotate our barrels. They go in and that's where they stay. Any Four Roses fans here? Yeah, I love Four Roses. In my head, we do things opposite of them. They change all their flavors prior to aging with their 5 yeast strains and 2 mash bills. And then their warehousing process, their aging process is fairly consistent. Their warehouses are shorter, and I think they might actually rotate. For us, it's the complete opposite. Everything is the same prior to aging for the most part, and then we don't rotate. Our warehouses are nice and big, lots of airflow and all that other stuff. So this is where all the magic happens for us. Top floor is going to age and evaporate very, very quickly. Very hot, very humid. 3 to 5 years max upstairs. So there's your benchmark flavors. If you've seen benchmark top floor, that bottle, y'all seen one of that? It's not bad, it's not bad. But that's where it's got. Now it's not top shelf. It's not, you got to look kind of low for that one. It's a pretty good mixer. Down here, the bottom floor, aging and evaporating very, very slowly. This is your top shelf stuff down here. This is where you can leave a barrel for 10 to 23 years. And then obviously in the middle, somewhere around the middle. Now that's just top to bottom. You also got side to side to think about. If that barrel's near a window, if it's sitting in an aisle, getting lots of airflow and exposure to that temperature difference, it's going to end up tasting totally different than something filled exactly the same stuff, sitting for the exact same amount of time, but further in the dark. Totally different flavor. Totally different flavor. So it's not just time, it's also location. Every piece of location inside these warehouses has a different taste profile that it creates. So down here, now all I can do is look at the barrel heads, and again, kind of like we did in there. I'll be honest with you, I can't read most of the barrel heads down here because they have been pressure washed.
So these barrels will not move for the flood?
No, there was no way to move all the barrels. There was just no way. We had thousands and thousands of barrels. Oh, I can read that one. This one says mash 1, and it's only been there for a couple of years, so it's got a little ways to go. It's got a little ways to go. So these that look a little bit older, they might not necessarily be older, but they were. I'm not even going to try to lie about it. Y'all saw where that line was, and those windows are not waterproof. So we did have barrels underwater. However, they have been chemically analyzed, pressure washed, all that other stuff. They were keeping a very close eye on everything, and last I was told, everything was going pretty well, because if nothing's coming out, nothing's getting in either. Plus, that soak line I showed you on that stave where the bourbon's soaked halfway into the barrel, that takes months and months, better part of a year. If a barrel was completely underwater, it was there for maybe a couple of days. So it wasn't enough time to have anything happen. These barrels are pretty strong suckers.
Might have a new label on it though.
Well, I guarantee one of these liquor stores that come in and do their barrel picks, they're gonna call it that on their sticker and charge double the price for it. So be aware, be aware. People in the 80s, it was closer to maybe 50. Nobody was drinking bourbon back then. That was the bourbon slump. The 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Basically, people have switched to the lighter spirits, the vodkas, the gins, those wine coolers that some of us have really bad memories about. Yeah.
Zimmer.
There you go. That tastes like poor decisions. So, in 1984, our master distiller was Elmer T. Lee. And Elmer and the other distillery friends that were working there at the time decided they were going to do something to get people drinking bourbon again. They wanted to do something nobody had thought of, and that was to process and bottle up one single barrel at a time. They named it Blanton's to honor Albert Blanton. That makes Blanton's the world's very first single barrel bourbon. So there's a label around the neck of the bottle that says the original single barrel. That is legit marketing. That's not made up at all, okay? 1984, that bottle came out. Nobody had thought about doing that before. Obviously it worked. Everybody is looking for that bottle. You can't find it anywhere, and a lot of people are drinking bourbon now. But let's talk about that aging process again. Raise your hand if you were drinking bourbon 23 years ago. If you were, thank you for your contribution. But for the most part, there's not too many. That was before the bourbon boom existed. So not a whole lot of people were drinking bourbon unless they were the original bourbon fans right there. Or they, yeah, technically I was of age, but not quite. not very much, not very much. So that is partly why older bourbon is more expensive. Part of it is because of that lack of product. By the time you get to 23 years, we don't have as much of it. The other reason is because 23 years ago, we were filling barrels based on the demands of 23 years ago. We don't have a lot of 23-year-old barrels on property. Not very many at all. Even your Buffalo Trace, you go and pull a bottle of Buffalo Trace off. Those barrels are 7 or 8 years old. 7 or 8 years ago, the demand was a lot less than it is today. So we're just constantly trying to play catch up, and that's what that double expansion, that double in production, that $1.2 billion expansion is all about. All right, let's head on in this way. Right here, it's about the size of well, I've been in houses that are bigger than this, but this is where every bottle of lands in the entire world, from beginning to end, is done. You'll see the barrels in there. They start with the barrels, they're dumping, they're processing, proofing, analyzing, bottling, ready for distribution, all in this little building. So they are actually bottling. We're going to head on in. Now, these guys are the nicest people in the world. I do ask that you not interfere with their job. They do have a job to do in there, and they take it very seriously. And let's just make sure that your pockets all look the same when you come back out. All right? All right, let's come on in. It's a red metal warehouse like this. It's kind of neat. If anyone needs an elevator, that elevator is located at medium path.
Alrighty, we just finished up Buffalo Trace tour. It's pretty good. They gave us a little tasting at the end. Was alright. Stuff we've all had before. I actually never had their vodka before, which was a little weird. But so now we've left Buffalo Trace. We thought about maybe hitting up Four Roses, but we decided we're going to try to make it to Maker's Mark. There's only going to be about a half an hour left of their opening once we get there. So Buffalo Trace is in Frankfurt, and then Maker's is in Bardstown. So there's a lot of stuff towards Bardstown. So we'll see. Randy, what do you think? Maker's, and then what might we hit tomorrow?
Tomorrow we might hit Lux Row, Heaven Hill, maybe Four Roses.
Yeah. So Lux, they do Penelope. They don't make it, but they do sell it. Rebel, Blood Oath, which is super weird.
Ezra Brooks.
And Ezra Brooks. Then obviously Maker's does their normal Maker stuff. And then Four Roses, you know, they do their 10 different things there. So, ship 42.
Yep.
So, almost missed our exit. So, less video, more driving.